Hi, this is Leora Lands, and you're listening to Marketing Mindset Lessons from Hospitality, the podcast where I speak with some of my amazing friends throughout the global landscape of hospitality and marketing. We will share best practices that you can use in your business, whether it's in traditional hospitality or not, whether you are an emerging leader in the industry, or seasoned and wanting to stay fresh and always learning. If you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, you need a marketing mindset. Whether you're marketing a business or yourself, we all need a marketing mindset. We know you're busy, but take a listen and figure out how you can apply this fresh thinking to your world, both professional and personal. Let's all think like a marketer.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Marketing Mindset Lessons from Hospitality. I'm Leora Lands. It's great to have you back with us today. And today we're going to talk about an element of marketing where I started my career in public relations. And it is my pleasure to bring to this conversation someone who's very dear to me, who I've known for quite some time, and who I actually really enjoy learning from because she's in PR in today's times, whereas I've done it years ago. Jamie Weber is an account supervisor at Blue Engine in New York City. It's a creative communications agency with hospitality and hotel clients among its roster. Jamie herself is a hospitality-driven public relations professional with 5 years of experience leading media relations, brand storytelling, event strategies for clients across CPG, restaurants, spirits, and lifestyle companies. CPG, by the way, that's consumer packaged goods for people who don't understand the acronym. Jamie currently represents Thompson Restaurants, Kettle One Vodka, Palladino Steak and Seafood, Metro Cinema, and the Cocktail Collection, and has previously worked with other well-known brands such as Planet Fitness and Black Tap Craft Burgers and Shakes. That's a mouthful. In addition, Jamie assisted in the launch of the seasonal cocktail and also worked with and at the Emmy Awards, the GLAAD Awards, the Sundance Film Festival, and several New York food and wine events for her clients. Jamie graduated from Boston University School of Hospitality Administration and later earned her master's degree in management from the Boston University Questrom School of Business. In her free time, she's probably trying a new restaurant, she's baking, or she's spending time with her beautiful mom and dad and her brothers and their families and the incredible network of friends that she has. So it is my pleasure to welcome to this conversation, Jamie Weber. Hi,
Hello,
Jamie.
Laura. That was quite the intro. Wow. Thank you so much.
It's all fact. It's all true. How are you?
Good. Thank you. It's amazing to be here. We've come full circle, having met you almost 10 years ago. Crazy to think about. And yeah, having you as my professor and intern for you. And now here we are. Thank you so much.
This is really cool. And I love that I'm learning from you because you're working in an agency focusing on public relations, which is how I started my career. And things have changed, and yet a lot of the essentials have stayed the same naturally. So when we chatted more recently about what's going on in public relations today, what are public relations agencies focusing on for our hospitality clients, we talked about a couple of things. So let's start with one that seems to be sort of top of mind for any industry, but particularly in hospitality as a PR initiative, and that's brand partnerships and collaborations. Talk a little bit about how you've seen that evolve, emerge, grow, when it works, when it doesn't work.
Yes, great question. Love this topic for sure. I feel like over the past few years, we've certainly seen a surge in brands turning to partnerships and collaborations, whether it be partnering with other brands or talent partners as a way to stay culturally relevant and generate buzz and to basically create new news, because the brand's been around for years. They need to find a way to stay relevant and garner that buzz. So yeah, I feel like a lot of brands are turning to partnerships to do that. And many may be doing it almost too often. Some I feel are maybe losing their identity a bit to doing too many collaborations and partnering with the wrong brands that may not make the most sense for them, or doing it for the wrong reasons, because I feel like some brands are just doing it to avoid the fear of missing out, which
Right.
I can totally relate to. I'm the queen of FOMO, as they say.
Well, let's talk about that for a second,
Yeah.
actually, Jamie, because that's a really smart point. Collaborations and partnerships are ways for companies and brands to expand their networks and
Right.
extend their reach, right? But then when is it overkill or when does it not make sense? Have you seen situations where you're confused by it, or just give us an example of when you think it might have worked and when you think it might not have worked?
Yeah. So I feel like consumers these days are they're extra savvy. They can quickly see through a forced collaboration or a brand deal that just might have been for the money potentially. But to keep that in mind, especially now on social media, how every other day you're seeing another brand pop up doing a collaboration with someone. But an example that comes to mind that of a talent partner that has been doing quite a lot, and I don't know how she has the time and energy, is actually, I feel like Martha Stewart is everywhere all at once.
Huh.
A recent collaboration that she worked on was with Liquid Death, the water brand. And they created a limited time candle. And knowing Martha, she's a culinary expert. She's been, of course, in the game for a long time with her restaurants and cookbooks and recipes. So candle didn't really make sense to me. Liquid Death, water brand. It was definitely keeping her relevant. Liquid Death is very top of mind for young consumers, but I just didn't feel like the right synergy for me. And since then, I think she's done 2 more brand deals and they're starting to blur in my perspective.
Right.
I think of her and I think of 10 different brands, and I feel like that's definitely not the brand's or the company's goal in the long term.
It's interesting because I wonder, and I've seen this with some of the clients that I've worked with personally or some of the projects that we work with in classes, when brands are trying to stay relevant to their existing customer, and then they want to make sure they're getting new customers.
Right.
And then sometimes it works, but at the detriment of the existing customer because it just doesn't seem to make sense. So, talk about that for a second. And it sounds like this Martha Stewart example could be one of those examples, but that's a tough challenge for a company. How do we remain relevant? Or, in the effort to try to attract new clients, you forget your existing clients. And that's not a good thing to do either.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I feel like we're always in this day and age chasing the next trend. And it's important to remember that not every trend has to be your company's trend. You have to remember who your current market is, who your demographic that's been loyal to you is, and also how that makes sense for the future generations and how to garner new customers. So it really is striking that balance. But I think at the end of the day, a collaboration or a partnership should really ladder back to the brand's ethos, their values, and really lean on the authenticity that makes them who they are, rather than finding the trendiest new partner to work with or the brand that everyone's talking about. Because at the end of the day, it's important to keep that North Star, your focus, and know that consistency is really what makes customer awareness into loyalty.
What do you think about, and this is how I would phrase it, sometimes brands are trying to be opportunistic to sort of take advantage of that trend, as opposed to being strategic. Is that something how do you guide clients to stay that way?
Yeah.
Or do you?
Yeah, we definitely do. We work on, most of my clients will have biannual plans. So we'll look at 6 months at a time and have an overarching strategy that we're focusing on. And of course, looking into different trends that are happening right now or what we see might be happening down the line. And just making those trends feed into the strategy rather than have them be the overarching strategy. Because by the time we implement whatever the idea is, that trend could now be last year's and not old news and not make sense for the brand anymore. So it's important to really keep a bigger picture, zoom out a bit, but also try to find ways to stay relevant and make those headlines alongside your competitors for sure.
Yeah, interesting. And it's funny because, talking about a celebrity, like a Martha Stewart, for example, where, it's big bucks to get somebody like that to be representing your brand. You really need to be sort of very smart about, is it working? And you need to test it too, right? You need to test it either beforehand and during to make sure it's actually syncing with what we're trying to accomplish.
Definitely. And I feel like the best collaborations really amplify what the brand stands for. Like they should amplify what the brand stands for. They shouldn't just be tapping into all different things all at once. And a good example that comes to mind is a brand that I'm a personal fan of, and that's Baked by Melissa.
Okay.
Been a huge fan since the 8th grade. And she's always finding ways to stay relevant in the media landscape. Of course, cupcakes are all over, and she was one of the pioneers in the
Well,
field.
Baked by
But
Melissa is the little mini cupcakes,
yes,
right?
yes,
That's what I actually like about it. I can have more than one because they're
right,
small.
very true.
Yeah. So what does she do? What does that brand
Yeah,
do?
she has really fun examples of cupcake collaborations because, of course, people go to her for the consistency and the cookie dough cupcake that's been around since she launched. But she also has really fun brand partnerships. One that comes to mind was with Clausen Pickles. And
Really?
if you know Melissa, she's a huge pickle fan. I'm a big fan of her TikToks and her cooking videos. So pickles are in her personal ethos. So collaborating with a pickle brand felt organic to me, but she created a product that I've never seen before. Whoever would have thought of a pickle flavored cupcake?
Not
So
me.
definitely
Okay.
unique.
Yeah.
Definitely something that was garnering buzz, and it wasn't completely random because pickles were trending. Pickles flavored items were everywhere. I think this was the summer of 2024, and Clausen had just come out with a sparkling cocktail with another brand, a pickle flavored sparkling cocktail. So
Well,
their name was
pickle
out
juice
there.
was even coming out as sort of a trending thing to do for health and wellness, right? At one
Exactly.
point. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
pickle juice shots for cramps and who knows. So the timing was there, the
Yeah.
personal connection was there, and then it actually was tied to National Pickle Month. So as PR professionals, we love cultural moments and finding
Right.
a reason for bringing this into the atmosphere. So it definitely gave it a little bit more relevance and like tied it all together pretty nicely. And although it seems crazy, a pickle flavored cupcake, I think it did what she wanted it to do. She partnered with a brand she was proud of and that she
Right.
felt connected to, and then obviously created a very unique cupcake and a unique product that would resonate with a bunch of different demographics.
Yeah. So here's what I'm hearing from that particular example, which is kind of a cool example. It's an integrated campaign. It's not just sort of this one-off random event. It's not just sort of this one-time gimmicky thing.
Right.
She had integrated it, but what was really respectable about it, I guess, is because pickle flavor cupcakes is not my thing, but it seemed genuine and authentic to her from
Right.
what I'm hearing. So it actually wasn't completely off base and bizarre. It actually made sense because it was genuine and people who actually followed the brand understood this sort of fit. This made sense.
Yeah, and I guess she's a unique example since she's almost her own brand. It's Baked by Melissa. She's the face. So it's not always that easy to do, of course, in a big corporation.
Right, right. There was a second sort of nuance or trend or observation that you wanted to talk about today, which was, and it's something that we've all seen, anyone who's in media or in some aspect of public relations in any field, we've seen this at least for the last 10 years. And that's sort of that changing landscape of media. And that is something that public relations folks need to understand and know how to work with to get ahead of. Can you talk about what is changing in the landscape of media, what has changed, where it's going, and what do we need to do to be smart PR people when it comes to navigating this?
Yeah, definitely. So in my almost 5 years as a PR professional, there's certainly been a lot of chatter about the changing media landscape and just how it's not what it used to be. How you introduced me, you said the same thing. This is a different world we're living in, and traditional earned media is not the same traditional earned media as it was when you were working in the fields. And it certainly isn't disappearing, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely diversifying and we have to stay nimble. So I would say the largest thing that's changed, I guess, is really just many layoffs that have been occurring. Some publications have been completely shuttering in recent years. So less journalists, less publications, there's less places for our clients to get coverage in. And I'm just feeling like these big layoffs are happening more and more often. A recent example, of course, that we probably all know of is the Washington Post recently laid off 300 out of 800 of their journalists. So huge, significant decrease in the amount of people that we can go out to. I think that even caused the suspension of one of their daily podcasts, which was a great place for clients to get their news out in. So as there becomes less journalists, there's less people for us to reach out to. And then at the end of the day, less opportunities for coverage. But at the same time, as some publications lay off their employees, they are then allowing for more freelance journalists, which have their
Right.
pros and cons. I would say a pro of working with a freelance journalist is now they're writing for a bunch of different publications and potentially writing for different beats or different angles at these
Right.
outlets. So if
Right.
I'm working with several different clients, which I do at my agency, I can now speak to this one person and have this garner this relationship that can then benefit a wider array of clients rather than just my niche chef in New York City, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And actually, interestingly, as you're sharing this, it makes me realize for anybody who's watching us and listening to this, when we're talking about public relations in this regard, we're talking about press coverage.
Right. Yeah.
We're talking because public relations, the role of a public relations practitioner is to help present the news and project the image and the brand values of a company or of a business,
Yes.
whether it's during a time of crisis or whether it's during when times are good and there's new products to launch, or whether there's new legislation that is happening and we need to have a voice in this conversation. So we're talking about, when Jamie mentioned earned media, we're talking about what is it out there in that digital landscape and physical landscape, right? When we talk about newspapers or magazines, but really on the digital front, because that's where a lot of the press is today, is where do we see our brands mentioned and how favorably or positively or brand aligned
Mhm.
is it mentioned in that regard? So we're talking about press coverage specifically in this regard.
Yes.
But I do love the fact, the freelancers, while it's frustrating because they're not with a particular publication, but in fact, hopefully they have sort of their pens or their computers connected to other publications where they can share
Right.
different angles of your company's and your client's story and their perspective.
Yes.
So
Definitely.
navigating that
Thanks.
landscape. Yeah, I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said, thank you for explaining that, giving the context. It's obvious to me, but of course not all of us.
Right. I want to make sure anyone who's listening understands that it's
Yes.
obvious for both of us, clearly. But so what have you had to navigate with this changing landscape and less sort of designated press and journalists, but more freelancers out there? Are you doing things differently? Do you find it more challenging? Do you find it actually easier? How are you navigating that as a PR person?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a bit challenging because we always should be keeping up with who works where and who's writing what. But as it changes even more frequently, it's almost a job in itself. I'm spending a good chunk of my week. I try to portion out some time in my day to literally look at change. Like there's a website we use called Muckrack, and you can see where journalists are going and you get job updates. So I'm constantly keeping up with their job updates to know that the writer that I was speaking to at Forbes about this restaurant now no longer works at Forbes, and they're now pivoting and writing for the Pioneer Woman, for instance.
Right,
Well,
right.
I'm going to pitch them about my restaurant client in New York, and they are no longer writing about that. They might get annoyed because, of course, it's a sensitive topic. And
Sure.
I'm the one who's sending my news to them, and I should know what they're actually writing about and what they care about. So it's almost its own day-to-day practice that I have to make sure I'm doing to ensure that I'm not making any journalists mad. We don't want that. And
Right.
also not wasting any of my time, because if I'm going to be sending the news out to 20 people and none of them are writing about that, then my client's news is going nowhere.
It's a lot to keep up with. You know,
Yes.
in regard to freelancers, this is sort of a perfect segue into the third trend that we're talking about today in terms of public relations. What are we focusing on? We're focusing on collaborations. We're focusing on a changing landscape. And let's talk about this third one, which has just blossomed like crazy. Some of these freelancers, whether they're freelancers or it's the rise of influencers and influencer marketing. And it's interesting because when social media sort of really surfaced as a really important vehicle and tool to communicate and connect, that's what I had phrased the rise of civilian journalism.
Right.
Who are we? I'm not a trained food reporter or a restaurant critic, but now all of us, have the camera in hand, can take that picture and can say something, and it either can actually really help a business or it can actually be terribly detrimental too, depending on the virality of that post.
Mhm.
Talk about influencers and how you work with them, vet them, source them, take care of them. And, it's tough. Here are people who are making a lot of money for a little post,
Mhm.
but yet they're really important to our strategy, or are they? So I'm just curious for your take on influencers.
Yes, definitely a good point. It's a blessing and a curse for sure, whether or not it's a
Yes.
positive or a negative post or it goes viral for the right reasons. But yeah, since traditional earned media that we talked about has been evolving, largely due to younger generations relying on different sources for their news. I recently saw that 77% of Gen Z and 67% of millennials will actually seek out new restaurants or new hotels via social media, opposed to going to your traditional travelandleisure.com.
Right.
So it's definitely an important tool for many brands to rely on, but I don't think that it should be our only tool. I think
Okay.
that it's still important to use the other mechanisms. But to answer your question in terms of vetting and just ensuring that the influencers you're working with are the right fit, it kind of goes
Right.
back to the collaboration conversation. Not every influencer is going to be the perfect fit for your brand. And sometimes there are clients that are really eager to hire anyone and they want to just get people in the door. But I think in the long run, that could be a detriment because you want to really build your brand and create this persona on social media very
Right.
strategically.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's something important to keep in mind. And it's interesting the array of my personal clients, how they view influencers. I would say some of my restaurant clients are very focused on it. They see a direct ROI from having them in and post, and others are still a little skeptical. They don't want this person to be like their brand ambassador. They don't know them that well. They don't
Right.
know what they're going to say. Like they can control the messaging to some degree, but at the end of the day, you really don't know. So there is that fine line between skepticism and reliance because it is a great tool, but it's still a little blurred, I would say.
I would share, I have a dear friend is a public relations practitioner. He's been doing it for decades. He's based in Rome. He is Italian. And his clients didn't even want to hear about an influencer because in their minds, who is this young person who knows
Right.
nothing about food, who's changing my dish on my meal, who's commenting about my restaurant? On the other hand, in one of my more recent trips, I think I was in Italy like 2 or 3 years ago, and we were in Rome, and something that my husband and I tend to do a lot whenever we travel is a food tour. So sure enough, we did a food tour and we got to this one particular restaurant early and before it opened, because that's when they can accommodate the tour group.
Mhm.
But I see a line outside the restaurant,
Wow.
blocks long, of young people, mostly female, but men and women too. So as we finished our food tour, sort of dining and experience at this restaurant, I walked over to the line and I said, "What are you waiting for?" They said, "The restaurant to open." I said, "It doesn't open for 3 more hours." "I can't believe you're waiting." "How did you even know about this?" "Oh, an influencer." "Oh,
Wow.
an influencer." "Oh, someone I follow." And by the way, they weren't just from the United States. I
Mhm.
met people from South America. I met people from other European countries. And sure enough, they're following influencers and they could not wait to
Wow.
get to this restaurant. So there is a power to it. And yet we just want to make sure it's, again, brand aligned.
Mhm.
And I want to ask one more question, Jamie, about sort of compensation for influencers, because a lot of people do ask us this.
Mhm.
Is it in kind where they're getting a meal? Are they getting paid? What's the obligation for the influencer to tell folks that they're getting compensated for this? What can you share with us about that?
Yeah, it definitely varies across industries and clients. On the spirit side, we have to disclose whether or not the influencer was paid, and they have to use hashtag ad, and of course disclaimers, being that it is alcohol. So there are a lot more stricter guidelines when it comes to working with Kettle One Vodka, for instance.
Okay.
And then with restaurants, it used to be very in kind. Influencers would be more than happy to come and enjoy a meal, get a comped experience, and then post about it. But now that a lot of these influencers are making this their full-time career and they're now expecting payment along with compensation. So that's definitely a little jarring for some restaurants that don't have a huge marketing budget. They didn't expect to have to pay these influencers. They're already giving them a great experience and a great meal. So it's kind of massaging that concept because we want the influencers to come experience it. It's important to our restaurants, but at the same time, it's shocking that they're expecting payment along with the free meal. So that's why it's also very important to ensure that you're not just going for quantity, but you're going for quality, and that you're hiring the right people, because it's not just a bowl of pasta. You're actually paying them and you want them to deliver positive results.
For anybody who might be watching this who is located outside of the United States, having done some work in Europe and in South America, and actually having written a chapter for my book about influencers where I had input from folks around the world, what happens in the United States in terms of influencer marketing sort of tends to lead how the rest of the world is following. They're not in the same place. I think if Europeans realized that they needed to pay, this would be sort of a shock to the system, but it may get to that point. So we'll see, we'll follow along and see what happens. So Jamie, today we talked about brand partnerships and collaborations. We talked about this changing media landscape, and of course, this emergence of the power of influencers as part of a PR strategy for earned media. Any best practices or any takeaways that you want to share with folks who are listening and watching to this? Just what do we need to know to work with the right agency or to handle PR? What would you recommend?
Yeah, definitely. One more thing came to mind about influencers that, if you don't mind, if I can share.
Please.
A major pro, I would say, is that they're a great way to strike a trend while it's hot, because you're able to get them a sample of your product or have them come by your restaurant for a meal pretty quickly. And they can usually turn out content pretty quickly as well. So if you're a type of brand that wants to jump on social media trends or capitalize on something that makes sense for your brand and in a more timely manner, I feel like influencers are a great.
Could work.
Yeah. And you can reach a very niche audience that way too. So just something I wanted to drive home.
Great point. Point.
Influencers can drive the culture, but while earned media still drives that credibility, and of course, earned media press coverage will live online forever, and a story post may go away, but it's still have the same impact.
Fair enough.
Awesome.
Any best practices for folks who want to work with an agency or to follow
I would
these
say
trends? Anything that you would want to share as sort of
definitely.
No?
Your agency that you're working with should definitely have team members that are well versed in the pop culture landscape. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're all a team of young people. You can still, it's great to have a different array of ages and backgrounds and perspectives, but just really keeping up with the times and able to be nimble is important. And also willing and wanting to try new things. So if your agency is reluctant to take on influencer marketing and you see everyone around you doing that, that might not be the best sign, because it is, of course, something that we have to consider and continue to be nimble, like I said. And I feel like they should also have very strong ties to different partners, and present creative partnership ideas when you are in that process of the new business pitching. If they're able to put forward creative partner ideas or talent partners, and you feel like that's something that you're interested in for your hotel or restaurant, then that's something you should be definitely looking for. And also, like I said, having the influencer and social media capabilities. If you're working with a traditional PR agency, odds are they have a whole digital division these days, and that definitely should be something that you're looking for if you want to tap into that space.
Pursue this space. Jamie, any last sort of thoughts about a PR team and the relationship with the brands and with your companies?
Yes, I feel that at the end of the day, the PR team really works best when the agency feels like an extension of your own internal marketing team, with strong trust, transparency, a shared vision of an understanding of what success looks like. That's really when you'll be the most successful.
I couldn't agree more. And as you remember in the classrooms, it was always about we, not you and us or you and me. It was we. We are an extension. Any agency that a company hires it's part of that same brand. We're all in it together. That's a great note to end on. Jamie, thank you for being here today. I love talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Marketing Mindset, Lessons from Hospitality. Marketing Mindset is a production of Think Tank Media and the Hospitality Nexus, the global platform for hospitality education, with resources such as podcasts, articles, and video tutorials. I'm your host, Leora Lanz, and if you want to learn more about how we can work together, visit my LinkedIn at Leora Halpern Lanz. Remember to order a copy of my debut book, the international bestseller, Developing Your Marketing Mindset, Real-World Lessons from Hospitality, which also won the Business Book of 2025 award from the New England Book Festival. And the newest in the series, the companion book, Marketing Mindset in Motion, inspired by hospitality. Everything you need to think like a marketer for your business, your service, or yourself. Connect with meaning through wellness, sustainability, and community to market with meaning and remember the hospitality. Until next time.